to the Fantasy Football Fanatics podcast with your hosts Griffin Palmer, CJ Hickman, Jason Cabrera, and Ryan Mitchell.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to the show. It is Tuesday, May 29th. This is the Fantasy Football Fanatics podcast, the official podcast of thefantasyfootballfanatics.com. I'm your host, Griffin Palmer, joined by Jason Cabrera. Jason, what's up, buddy?
Not a whole lot, man. What? No CJ again?
No CJ again. I want to come up with some fun task. He's off skiing the Alps, climbing Mount Everest, something with snow, because I think he hates snow. So maybe facing his fears. I don't know. At least I think he hates snow. I think I remember him saying something about that in the past. I could be wrong. I don't know. Could be way off.
He's from Arizona, so.
Well, he is from Arizona. That's true.
We don't know from snow, but over here.
And yet he's an Eagles fan, though he's never been to Philly, if memory serves. So I don't know.
That's I don't understand that. I'm never gonna understand.
He has told me his reason for why he's an Eagles fan at least 1,000 times, and I think I have an inkling, but I still am unclear. So, but he is. He's
you know what?
He's not fair weather. I'll give him that.
I'll tell you this. I'm an Army brat. I grew up in an Army family, and
right.
I didn't have a home state.
Right.
You know, like I was born in North Carolina, but I lived there for like a year. I lived in Germany for years and years. And I actually, when I was a little kid, I was actually, and I don't think I've ever told you guys this, but I was actually a Cowboys fan when I was a little kid. Yeah.
You know what, actually?
Kid. Now, when I moved to Arizona, I adopted the Cardinals because that was now my home state. And I spent all my time here, so I've adopted them completely. But yeah, I was, for the longest time, I was a Cowboys fan. Man. I was Troy Aikman, Emmitt Smith, Alvin Harper, Michael Irvin, all those guys. I loved that team.
I think I knew that at one point. Because I think I remember you talking to Mike, ex-member of our League of Record, Mike, about that at one point. Because Mike is a Cowboys fan. I feel like I knew that.
Never set foot in Texas at that point.
You just rooting for America's team.
They were America's team. That's why, too.
Yeah. All right.
That's why I picked them.
Look, you can be a fan of any team for any reason, as long as you have a reason.
Right.
It could simply be, I turned on the TV, and the first game I saw was between these two teams, and that team won, so I became a fan of that team. You know, I'll accept even that. I just need a reason.
I know a Vikings fan who's like that. First game he saw was a Vikings-Raiders game, and he loved the Vikings after that.
There you go. I mean, I understand if you like a uniform. I understand if you like a player, which I think was what CJ's stories was. He liked a player on the Eagles or something. I've known. I have a family member who she was a Colts fan, and then she became a Redskins fan, and she said she was following Pierre Garçon to the Redskins, and I'm like, so now what, are you a 49ers fan? And so she stuck with the Redskins. No, I think that was her excuse. It's just because...
Based on Pierre Garçon?
Yeah, I know, a number 2-3 receiver at the time, and my argument, I think, still stands true. It's because my entire family is Ravens fans, and she's always been that one member of the family who always goes the opposite way to try and get attention, so I think that's what it was, but, it's neither here nor there. So yeah, just as long as you have a reason, I'll accept it. As long as it's, it's one that you back up and you're not fair weather, you're not just going with the team that's winning, and, as soon as your team starts sucking, you jump ship, because that's just not what it's about, guys. You got to go through the ups and the downs, the peaks and the valleys. My Ravens were in the Super Bowl a couple years ago. We have not been quite the same since. I'm still a Ravens fan and will always be. So, I think everyone who's listening to the show can identify with that rationale. So, yeah. I guess we should wrap up this long little side tangent we've been on, and let's get to the show. I guess also I'll ask, how was your Memorial Day? I never want to say I hope you have like a happy or a fun Memorial Day, because it's not what it's about, and I hear that all the time, and I'm like, no, it's a day of remembrance, being with family.
I always say I'm observing Memorial Day.
You don't
really celebrate Memorial Day. I observe it
because of course you served, so I mean, yeah, you know what it's all about. So how was your day? You spend some good time with family?
Actually, we did. We went out to dinner. I had to work, before, but then we went to dinner and had a nice steak dinner at Texas Roadhouse.
Ooh,
great.
Yeah, I had to work as well, but then I got to meet up with family. Did something bigger on Sunday as well, so it was good. It was good. I hope everyone out there listening had had a good Memorial Day. Spending with friends and family, I guess, is a safe way to say it.
Good observance.
Yeah, like
Memorial Day.
Because I heard some people saying Happy Memorial Day, just like walking down the street. I'm like, no, that's not what it's about.
A little off color.
Yeah,
honestly,
I mean, it's not any number of other holidays where that's what you say. So I don't know. Maybe that's a whole other side conversation. We're like 10 minutes in, and we haven't even started talking about the show yet. Actually, how far are we in?
They love it.
Okay, it's about 5 minutes. Either way, still. So yeah, welcome to the show. I promise you guys, we are a fantasy football podcast, so let's get to that. We have an amazing show for you guys today. Today, as we were mentioning earlier on, we are talking about league management. So we got all of our questions today from the mailbox. So if you submitted via Twitter, YouTube, iTunes, not iTunes, we didn't get any questions from reviews, but emails, all these various forms of ways that you can interact with us, Facebook messages, we pulled them together. Now, we had a lot of repeat questions because this time of year there's a lot of the same questions circulating, so we lumped up the most commonly asked ones and put them all on this list. So if we're reading a question that you asked and your name's not attached to it, just know we saw it. We just kind of threw a name on there. It's just the first one we saw, but we saw your question and we're going to give you an answer. It'll be in the show. So yeah, that'll be today. It should be a lot of fun, and hopefully you guys enjoy. Hopefully we help you out, and I know a lot of league managers out there, you're the ones that are really committed. Probably listening this time of year is probably a larger majority than people that will be listening later on. So hopefully this is helpful to you guys. And if you're not a league manager and you hear something that you identify with and you agree with, take it to your league. So that's what it's all about. We're trying to evolve fantasy football. It's not the same game it was 10 years ago, much less 20 years ago, and it should be continuing to move forward. And we'll talk about a couple of those alternative league formats actually on Friday's show. That's a little sneak peek. We're going to be talking about stuff like that. But we'll get there. So as always, if you guys are listening, make sure you subscribe wherever you are on YouTube or iTunes or Apple Play, whatever it's called, Apple podcast app, Google Play, that's the one.
Whatever.
Stitcher. Why did they rebrand? Why did they change the name? We all know what iTunes was. Whether you like or hate Apple, you knew what iTunes. Yeah, that's true. You knew what iTunes was. But regardless, I think you can still. I think it's still technically under iTunes. I don't know. I'm not an Apple user, so I don't know. But yeah, subscribe wherever you're listening. Give us a rating. Give us a review. Helps us out a ton. And make sure you guys subscribe on Patreon. There should be a bunch of new content coming towards Patreon soon. Now that we're kind of ramping up, getting closer to the new season, so we'll be getting all that content up and rolling over there as well. Yeah, and if you have questions, send them in, and you'll probably get an answer like we do here on the show, or personal answer. Like a lot of the times, I start conversations back and forth because I want to get as much information as possible from you guys before I give you your answer, because everybody's league is different. As we'll get to some of that as we move on in this show. So I guess let's start with some of our top headlines from around the league, and really our only league headline, because they're very slow news week, as you would expect this time of year. Unless there's an injury, there's not a lot that's actually being put out there. We have the new NFL Top 100, numbers 50 through 41. Number 50, Deshaun Watson, quarterback Houston. Do you think a kid who played in 5 games roughly, like really well, I think it was, 7 weeks overall that he was healthy, do you think I should have this in front of me, but I don't, but that's off memory. Do you think he deserves to be the 50th best player in the league? I mean, though we argue every week. I mean, go ahead.
You base it on what he did. I mean, what he did was phenomenal. He was in there, he was ridiculous. I mean, he was the best he was the best player in the league, for those weeks that he was there. So I get it. I understand. I agree. I'm kind of like you. I'm kind of like, dude, he didn't even play a whole season. Anybody can be good over a short amount of time. Maybe lower. I think he deserves to be on a list. I don't know if he deserves to be number 50, though.
I just think that's crazy. I know, look, he was a phenomenal performance for 5 of those 7 weeks. I was right. It was 7 weeks. Memory's not gone yet. But, every player gets on these hot streaks. It was a short spurt against some mostly favorable matchups, and now we'll see how he does coming back with a year of defenses seeing what he did and adjusting to him, and a lot of other variables that we've already talked about in depth about how the Houston's offense went through some peaks early on and not really quite the same after he got injured and later on the season. We've deep dived on that pretty efficiently, I think, at this point. So we'll see. I mean, look, he was phenomenal. So I'm not surprised he made the list because this is also a popularity contest and everyone's just looking at what he did, like you said. But to say he's one of the top 50 players in the NFL after playing in 7 games, that's, again, undeserving is not the right word, but surprising, I think, is kind of where I fall. We'll see. I mean, could he be this good or better? Possibly, probably, maybe. We'll see. But it's a little surprising to see him up this high. Number 49, Darius Slay, cornerback for the Detroit Lions, unrated a year ago. 48, Cameron Hayward, defensive end for Pittsburgh, unrated a year ago. Ryan Shazier, linebacker for Pittsburgh, unrated a year ago. And this is where, again, they say it's up 2018, but it's really looking back from 2017 because obviously Ryan Shazier is not going to play in 2018. So obviously he's not going to be the 47th best player in this upcoming season. That's why this list is it's all for fun. And we wish him a speedy recovery. Obviously, I was more surprised by the fact that he was unrated a year ago. Like, what an oversight there. I did not notice that.
My goodness, yeah. I completely agree with you. That's ridiculous.
Yeah. Number 46, Harrison Smith, safety of the Minnesota Vikings, 74 a year ago. I think deserving race. He's one of the best safeties in the league. 45, Devontae Adams, wide receiver, Green Bay, unrated a year ago. Kind of surprised he's up this high. I know in fantasy circles people like him. He's a big red zone target, and so, I mean, he's productive. So you have to... And I'm sure they're making the argument, he was the only thing that worked when Aaron Rodgers went down, but he was also being force-fed the ball. So... it's all perspective. I'm not surprised he's on this list. I expect to see him behind some of the names that we've probably already heard at wide receiver if we're talking about all-around talent. But sky's the limit, especially in a Green Bay offense with Aaron Rodgers. So, okay. 44, David DeCastro, guard for Pittsburgh, 97 a year ago. 43, Mark Ingram, running back New Orleans, unrated a year ago, and probably going to be not on this list next year, if I had to guess, missing time and then losing his starting position. We'll see. Number 42, Earl Thomas, safety for Seattle, 30 a year ago, and 41, Keenan Allen, wide receiver, I even started to put St. Louis on here. St. Louis, San Diego. I can't even do that right. But yes, Los Angeles Chargers, unrated a year ago, obviously coming off injury, and had a phenomenal year. So, not surprised to see him where he is. So with that, I mean, that's really it. There's not a lot of news. So we'll move right into why everyone's here. Our topic of the day, which is our league management mailbag. So just to recap, if you skip forward to this, we got a lot of questions. A lot of them were, except for maybe the wording, the exact same question. So just because we read off a question and your name's not tied to it, we saw you. We just threw the first name up associated with the question as we went through the progression. So I guess let's just go through these one-on-one. We have about, a dozen questions that we pulled. And again, these are all league management focused. We'll get into a lot of other stuff and other mailbag down the line. That's just the topic of today's show. So let's start with Tim from Baltimore, Maryland. What's up, Tim? And he says, normal, snake, or auction drafts. I think by normal he means linear because snake is the norm.
That's what he means.
So I'm assuming that's what he meant. I like linear for rookie drafts, but if it comes down to my preference of a draft for a redraft league, it is auction 10 times out of 10, bar none. Auction is the best, and it's something that more people need to do. Our listener league is we always give them the option, what do they want, and a lot of times like, we'll try it, and then I think the consensus has generally been that they love it coming out of it. It's a much longer event. I know to some that's not appealing. I know a couple of people who are serious fantasy players, like with our League of Record is obviously an auction draft, and we had a spot or two to fill last year, and I'm still looking to expand that league and add maybe a couple more people to it. But I have a hard time filling it because people are scared of auction, and you shouldn't be. And other times people don't want to put in that time commitment, which I don't understand. For me, and I know you feel the same way, Jason, the draft is easily one of the best times of the year. The draft and the playoffs are what it's all about. You wait from the end of your fantasy football season through the off season and to the getting ramped up, doing your research. Like, you spend more time out of your fantasy year prepping for the draft than you do anything else. So why not make a day of it? A typical auction draft goes 3 to 4 hours, I think, depending on your league size. Ours goes for about 8 to 10, because we have massively expanded rosters, IDP, all that stuff in there. Yeah, we're insane, but it's an all-day event. You get all these competitors / really good friends. You want to make sure your league is all good friends. You can tolerate each other for that long. But you get the whole league together. You bring a potluck bunch of food. This is what we do. Or order some stuff. We have all these supplies, and you make a day of it. And then you make people show up to that draft. Unless they're physically incapable, they're way across the country, it's not driving distance, or maybe they fly. Who knows?
Sorry.
Oh, well, in our case, yeah, that's you, Jason. But I'm not signaling you out. Just in general, get everybody together because it's so much better in the room, bidding each other up, and everybody freaking out. And for all of you listening who don't know what the heck an auction draft is or how they work, we're going to be getting into that a little bit further into the off season. We'll be doing auction every year. We do a whole show just covering auction drafting, what it's about, how to approach it, what you're looking for to do, strategies surrounding it, and then we do auction mock drafts. So just bear with us for a while. We'll get to that because we love it. We also talk auction a lot more over on Patreon. But yeah, I choose auction 10 times out of 10. And then if I can't do auction, it's snake, which is the norm, not linear. Linear is crazy. I understand that that's what the NFL does but the reason the NFL does that in their player drafts is because they want to help those teams that finish lower. It's built around helping those crappy teams to get better by giving them better value in their picks more consistently. Jason, your thoughts here?
Well, I mostly agree with you. As far as getting people together and all that kind of stuff, guys, seriously, love that. Definitely love that part of fantasy because I don't get to partake in that, to be honest with you. When they're doing the auction draft, the 10-hour ridiculous auction draft that we do, I'm literally sitting at my computer just watching the picks come and watching the auctions and all that kind of stuff. I don't get to sit in the room with the guys. I don't get to joke and do all that kind of stuff usually. I'm on a really bad Skype.
Yeah, we Skype you in. You're at least involved, but yeah.
I get Skyped in, but you know what? I don't. Like I said, I'm eating whatever I've got in front of me. They've got their food. But my point is,
so many leftovers.
Yeah, you definitely you want to make it an event. You definitely do. So I agree with you. I like auction drafting. It definitely it puts in another level. It brings it kicks it up a notch. Where you hear us answering a lot of these questions like this. It's all about becoming a better player. And the auction draft is you have to be very good. You have to be very good at what you do, being able to assign value, not just assign a draft slot, but assigning value to that draft slot, which is difficult and fun. It is just a lot of fun to do. And I'll say this too, and we're going to be doing a show about it, but I'm also going to be doing an article about auction drafting, another article. I did one last year. I'll do another one this year, and that'll be coming out on the fantasyfootballfanatics.com. So keep an eye out for that. However, I will also say I do love a good snake draft. I do. I enjoy doing a good snake draft. It definitely kind of gets the juices going. So, you can do several leagues in a year, and I do a little bit of both, but I really do like auction drafting the best.
Yeah, I mean, look, you're going to play in more snake drafts than anything else. That's the standard across all formats, all websites. You're going to do it. Your casual leagues, your work leagues, your friend leagues, it's going to be the norm. We just are saying it should be auction because that's so much better. But yeah, it's for a lot of reasons we'll get into. We don't want to deep dive into auction. Well, actually, I would love to deep dive into auction right now, but we're not going to. That's a whole topic for a whole nother day. But trust us when we say that auction drafting is the best way to be drafting. It's so much fun. If there's a player and you want him, no matter where you're drafting, you can get that player, and that's the beauty of it. You just have to be willing to pay the price, and that's we'll leave that little cliffhanger right there, and we'll come back to that in a couple weeks down the line, probably when we finally get to start talking auction, which I can't wait. So yeah, hopefully that's helpful, Tim, and everyone else who asked that very similar question. Let's go to Sam from Houston, Texas. What's up, Sam? All right. Asks, what are your thoughts on an IR spot? And I always say I'm all about the IR spot. We got a question last year about adding a second IR spot, and I think that's adding too much. It's taking away from a big aspect of the game, which is waiver wire and free agent budget and working all those systems, working trades. It eliminates your need to do that. But having one for when you have a key player go down that you don't want to drop, like if you had David Johnson last year, for instance, he went down week 1. We heard all this stuff about how he could be back as early as week 8, might be as late as week 12, but he should be back. You didn't have to drop David Johnson, your number 1 overall pick. I mean, obviously in the long run, he didn't end up coming back because the Cardinals were out of contention, but he wasn't burning that roster spot. And then if you don't know what an IR spot is, it's a spot that's off your roster. You can move an injured player, or depending on the league, the website you play on, they sometimes allow you to put players who are just inactive in there. It's case by case, but most websites, they have to actually be hurt or have some sort of injury designation. But you put them into the slot, it opens up a bench spot for you, and then you can go grab another player. And then when you're, Sorry, something in my throat there.
You're right there.
Yeah, I know, some saliva. So when you when you go to activate that player, then you just have to drop a player, make room on your roster, bring that player off IR onto your team. It's like a real NFL transaction rather. So I love it. I think that all leagues should have it because it adds a new level of depth and complexity to the league and strategy. But I will say leave it at 1 because having 2. It takes something away from the rest of your league experience. What are your thoughts, Jason?
No, I completely agree. I like having an IR spot because, like you said, if I draft a guy number 1 overall and he sprains his ankle or something, I don't want to have to take up a roster spot with him knowing he's going to be out for a couple of weeks. I would rather have an IR spot for him, slide him in there, and that's a strategy too. Like if you decide you're just going to drop the guy, someone else might possibly get him, and that's happened to me a couple times in leagues that didn't have an IR spot. So I do like IR spots. It does give you a little bit more flexibility.
Yeah, when you get those like bye-week apocalypses come up with like 6 teams on a bye,
right.
And you're like, I have no choice but to drop my key players. Yeah, it sucks, and you don't want to have to do that. So the IR spot makes it a little bit more of a chess match, moving things around, finding the right puzzle pieces, and way to construct your roster to make it work. It's just fun. I really enjoy having the IR spot. So yeah, I highly recommend adding that to your league if you don't have one. Let's move on. Justin from Boston. He asks, how many... Oh, hi, Justin, first off. Hi. How many bench spots would you have? Our league has 3 to keep... What? Our league has 3 to keep people active, but I think that's insane. I'm assuming he means that that's way too few, and I would completely agree.
I think so, too.
I think I understand what they're going for there, trying to constantly keep it going, but depending on your league size, like, I don't know. Like if you're in a really small league, then yeah, it doesn't really matter. You're going to stay active when you have bye weeks because you're going to be able to drop starter quality players and pick up starter quality players. But if you are a team that has if you're in like a 12, 14, 16 team league and only have 3 bench spots, I mean that's still going to keep the talent pool way too deep, and you're going to end up dropping players that you don't want to drop or just to fill in stuff. It just adds all these wrinkles that I don't like. It takes strategy out of it to an extent. You're going to lose players you want to hold on to because you have to fill bye weeks. And what happens if you have more than 3 players on a bye in a week? You can't fill the roster without dropping even active starters for you. So I think that's crazy. 5 is pretty standard, 5 to 6 depending on the site that you're on. And I think that's a pretty good sweet spot, maybe 5 spots with an IR like we were just talking. I think 3 is way too shallow. I understand, again, the thought behind it, but I'm not a supporter of it. What are your thoughts, Jason?
No, I agree. There should be more. I mean, you should have enough that it makes you like you said. When we do our drafting, we always draft for depth. I mean, you take like 5 or 6 running backs.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And that's a strategy. That's something that goes into how you play. And that's important. That's part of it. If you're just drafting your starters and that's it, it's kind of boring.
It takes a whole part of the puzzle out of it, the equation, the strategy. It's to me, that's not how fantasy is supposed to be played. You're supposed to have your team of your players. And you see a lot of players who won't trade or anything like that because that's the way they view it. These are my guys, and I'm going to live and die and win and lose and compete with this team. And if you only have 3 bench spots, you can't really move guys around your roster to do that. So I'm not a fan. So, Justin, I would say that, I would push at least 2 more bench spots because, 12 teams, that's another 24 players that are off the board or off the waiver wire. And that means that it's even deeper there in your league of what you have to be knowing and targeting and streaming and waiver wire adding and dropping. And it just adds more complexity to the league. So, yeah, I would definitely push to add at least 2. And, depending on your website, maybe 3. Get to the standard. It's somewhere in there. And get the IR spot if you don't have one. Hey, back to Sam's question. So hopefully that's helpful. Anything you want to add? We're ready to move on?
Yep, ready to go.
Let's go. All right, next one we have Matt from New York City, and he asks, what's up, Matt?
New York City.
That's him, and he asks, what is your thought on vetoing trades? What is the best method? We get this question all the time. I feel like I answer this question probably every week, honestly, but we talk about it on the show at least once a year, and my answer is always the same. I don't like vetoing because vetoing is rarely used for the purpose that it's intended. To me, vetoing is only there to keep collusion from happening. Beyond that, yeah, sometimes more knowledgeable players will take advantage of players who are not in the know. That's where doing your homework, knowing the strategy, knowing the value behind players, and really just following what you're doing, and here, this being fantasy football, comes into play. A lot of time people veto trades just because they don't like it, and a lot of times it's because they're mad that they weren't able to pull that fast one over on someone else. And you know what? If it's a swap that both teams are happy with, let it go. If it's a swap that, yeah, someone took advantage of somebody else, well, that's that other person's fault for not knowing what was happening. Yeah, I know that's a little bit cold, but that's truly how I feel. And so I think that a veto can be a thing, but I think it should be a league manager veto, and that's when, something clearly, like if an expert took advantage of a complete newbie, it's completely one-sided, and then maybe if the whole league is against it, maybe then, but for me, it's really just when it's collusion. Like, we had this problem in one of our leagues a couple years ago where one guy tapped out on the season, and he was like, screw this, I'm going to blow the league up, and he traded away all of his best players to another team who happened to be his closest friend in the league. So he was trading like 5-star players for one scrub. Yeah, in that case, lock it down, veto that stuff, shut it down, don't let it happen. But as a whole, it takes away from the game. And trading, I feel like, is hard enough to make happen as it is because so many people are so skeptical and they don't trust each other. And then to finally make a trade happen and then to have the league veto it just because they didn't like it, I'm very against that. So I'm sure you have a very different approach because you don't trade as much as I do, Jason. So what are your thoughts?
No, I actually agree with that. I don't like the idea of people just vetoing stuff willy-nilly. I believe that the veto should come if a majority of the league owners, the players, get together and say this is clearly collusion, or if the commissioner looks at it and says, whoa, that is clearly collusion, and that should be the only real reason to veto a trade. I don't like the idea of it. I don't trade that much, but at the same time, if I'm going to trade with somebody, and if I say, hey, Griffin, I'll trade you this for that, and you say, yeah, that's fine, we've agreed to the trade, it really shouldn't be anybody else's business unless, of course, like I said, it's me going, I'm giving up on the season. Here, Griffin, here are all my best players. Oh,
yes. No, I agree. And so also with best method, and this is something I'm pushing in our League of Record, I want to get rid of the veto period altogether. I want a trade happens, it's instant, and that way if you trade like right before the week starts, you can get those players in because sometimes accidents, injuries happen. Sometimes people get hurt in warm-ups and you have to fill a roster spot. You should be able to make that happen. And yeah, then the league can convene and you can maybe backstep it down the line if it's collusion or whatever your league decides on how to approach it. And that's something I'm going to be taking to my league this year because I think that's how it should be. I don't know how you feel about it, Jason, because I haven't talked to you about it, but I've played in leagues that are like that, and to me, it's just so much better because it's not like, okay, we traded, I'll get my player in 2 to 3 days, depending on your, or maybe even only a day, depending on your league's setup, and you're like, oh, well, now I gotta sit and wait, and you, if, for instance, if you're a team that traded 2 players away to get 1, and there's a guy out there that you want to go pick up for that extra roster spot you're going to have, you can't do it till the trade processes. So that's something I'm pushing. I don't know. Well, let's talk about it here. What's your thoughts on that, Jason?
On the veto period? Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think there should be, the trade can go. The great thing about having a commissioner is the commissioner can always go back and go, no, let me fix this, if he sees something happen. So, yeah, I don't like a long veto period that causes that kind of thing. Because like you said, if I want to do a quick trade right before the week begins, I should be able to do that.
Yep.
I shouldn't have to wait on the rest of the league to look at it and go, yeah, I'm fine with that. It's not, again, none of their business. Why are they involved?
Exactly. So, yeah, I'll put you down as a 4 for getting rid of the veto period. Yeah, all together.
You can do that.
Trades are instantaneous. Let's do this. All right, so that was fun. You saw some real-life negotiating right there, which is, I think, a question later down the line about how you make things happen. But, yeah, we'll get there.
There you go.
So that was Matt. So let's go on to Ken from Arlington, Virginia. What's up, Ken? And he asked, what do you think the best way? Oh, here it is. What do you think the best way to make changes is in a league?
Nice segue.
I know, right? Completely unintentional. I promise. I wasn't even looking there. But I like it. That was very professional, and we're ruining it by talking about it. So let's just talk about it.
Of course we are.
So the way we approach things in our big league of record, which I am firmly in stance that this is the best way to do it, is 100% democratic. We have a democracy here where, yes, for instance, I'm the league commissioner. I don't change a thing unless we have majority rule. If it's 50-50, the change does not pass. So every year we get about 12 or so rule changes that are proposed, whether that be things that affect the draft, the free agency, if that affects our player acquisition, if it affects our rosters, if it affects our scoring. None of it goes through unless at least. So our league of record, because of how big the rosters is a 10-team, which makes me sick. I wish it was 12. But so we have to get at least 6 people to vote yes, so more than half. And I think that's the way to go because it involves everybody, and everybody should have a voice. And you don't want to do something that's going to upset the majority of your league, because then they're like, if enough of that happens, they might just back out of the league, and then the league will fall apart. So this way, the people who are against it knows that they were in the minority. The majority of people wanted it, and a lot of times then people can come to terms with it, make the adjustments, and move on. So I don't think that the league commissioner should be throwing his power around willy-nilly, doing whatever he wants, because that's I think, a sign of a toxic and probably pretty crappy league. And I say that as a league commissioner, as I'm sure most of you listening right now probably are. So, Jason, what's your thoughts?
I agree. I definitely the one thing with our league, me being out of town, is kind of hard because what I'd love to see is I'd love for us to have a league meeting where we get together and actually debate these things. Like someone goes, okay, just like what the NFL does. They say, okay, here's a proposed rule change. And then they all get together and they debate it, and then they take a vote at the end, and then democracy rules out. Majority wins. That's in a perfect world. That's how it should happen.
I agree. I would love to do that. But again, we understand not everybody can. But this kind of falls in line with questions we get all the time as well. How do you keep the league interesting year-round? And unless it's a keeper league and you're doing rookie stuff right now, it's really hard to keep a league engaged during the offseason. So even we struggle with that to an extent in our big league of record, because our big league of record, we don't do keepers or dynasty because we have every other possible scoring format, and we like knowing with our auction draft you can go get those guys. Now, that is something that's proposed every single year, that we should have at least one keeper, and it never passes, but it's always pretty close to passing, which is kind of the interesting thing. But this is just one of those off-season things that you can do as a league. Maybe have a meeting, at somebody's house. That's the obvious choice. You could do an online hangout, but why don't you guys go out and do something and make an event of it? Have a league outing. Go see a movie, grab some dinner, talk about it. Or we see people who go bowling or do any sort of outdoor sporting activity. Who knows? But make a day of it. Make an event. Have a league outing. Have fun. And who knows? If you have a buy-in for your league and it's large enough that you can maybe factor this in, maybe have it as an annual event and have part of the league buy-in go towards supporting that outing, whatever the case may be. Or what's always fun is if you have the last place guy pay for things. That's always fun too, but as a punishment. But that's a whole nother show worth of conversation. So Jason, anything you want to add before we move on?
No, I think we covered it.
All right, so best way to make changes: talk about it, get the league together, get a majority rule, vote. Yes. All right, let's move on. Ryan from Twitter, obviously I don't know where he's from because it's from Twitter. He says, well, I guess it does say if I go into his profile. Too late now. I am the league manager for my league. Really? Welcome, Ryan. Sorry, I was lazy, I guess. I just copied and pasted. So he says, how would you recommend going about replacing multiple league owners in a 12-team keeper league? We lost 4 owners, and we don't know how to best assign new owners and don't want to start over. So we get this question, I feel like, every year. And the way that I always say, you don't want to just randomly give the teams to players because there's no really good way to do it. Because what if one team is a lot better than another team? Obviously, you don't want to start over because if you put years into it, the other, he said 4 players here, so the other 8 players in your league have spent seasons, years building the rosters they have now. So, and you don't want to just necessarily throw all the players out there in a pool that everybody can grab either. What I always recommend, and I think we talked about it pretty extensively last year during one of our shows, what you should do is you should have all those 4 teams that the people were gone dissolved. Obviously, if one person leaves and you bring one person in, that's fine. Even if it's 2, maybe you can vote on it. But really, once you get past one person, I like this approach of you dissolve those teams. So you have the 4 new owners who come in, and you do a draft for those 4 players. They draft their teams, and then you go from there. And then I guess they can assign their keepers depending on how you want to do it, or maybe have those 4 people draft initially. I mean, guys, that's what you have to do. You draft from that pool of players who was dropped, and then they assign their keepers. And a lot of times I'll have them assign their keepers based on ADP because obviously their rounds were not the way that it's going to normally necessarily work out. So I have it all go off at their average draft position. If you look on Fantasy Football Calculator, places like that, where you see what the average draft position for these players are, and then you go from there. It's a little complicated, but it works. I've been in leagues where you had to do this, where I was in a league where they lost over half the league, and that's what they did. Everyone dissolved their teams. They drafted from that pool of players. They assigned their keepers. Then everyone had their keepers in. You started the new league year with the new draft, so you have to draft twice if you're a new manager, and you just go from there. That's what I recommend because I think that's the fairest way to do it. What are your thoughts, Jason?
I have almost exactly the same thoughts.
There you go.
Yeah, you basically, okay, so what I would say is, first off, don't just pick somebody and say, okay, you're in the league. I think the same thing as rule changes, same thing should happen. Okay, we got 4 slots. We've got these 6 candidates who want to be on, in the league, and then you vote on it. Now, if you've only got 4 people who want to be in the league, then it kind of, limits your access to that kind of thing. But if that's what you're asking, how do we pick who's going to be in the league? Yeah, you get everybody together, you let them talk, let the candidates state their case, and then the owners vote. And whoever gets voted in, they become the new owners, the new members of the league. Then, just what Griffin basically said, you dissolve the teams. You have a separate draft with those 4 new teams. Let them draft from the pool of players that was there. And then they've got their keepers.
Yeah, and there you go. That's because what if your league champion? Maybe it's like a crappy league, and he's won the league a bunch of years, and he's done with it, and he leaves. Somebody's going to inherit that awesome team when someone else inherits probably a last-place team, and that's why people left. That's just not fair. So, yeah, that's just, to me, the best way to do it, and that requires skill to get the team up and running as well. Maybe, obviously, you keep rookies out of that draft, by the way, because, again, they have to draw from that pool of players who was discarded from those other teams, and then that way you go into the whole league year. Because I don't want to be like, oh, well, these all these 4 teams you guys draft, and then someone drafts Saquon Barkley right away. It's like, oh, well, that's not fair to the other players who were looking out for it. Or if you're in a dynasty league and you have a rookie draft and you wanted that guy, and you had better draft position than any of those teams, and that's a whole other conversation for how you figure out those slots. And we'll talk about that down the line because we got to keep moving.
Right.
Hopefully that was helpful, Ryan from Twitter. The next one comes in from Tulane. How would you pronounce that? Taline, Taline. I should probably Google the pronunciation. Doesn't matter. From Twitter, again, could have probably looked to see where you're from, but I didn't, sorry. Asks, I think it's a she, would you recommend playing in a fab system? If so, how would you go about pitching it to your league? Holy crap, yes, fab. 10 times.
Fab.
As strongly as I feel about auction, I feel about fab. Do I like the waiver system? Yeah, it's fine. There's strategy to it, but nothing touches fab because, again, you have to be cunning. You have to know your league. You have to know the value of players, and you have to know how bad you want them and how much you're willing to spend to get them. It's a silent auction system. Once the players clear waivers, the player who spent the most of their budget wins. FAB stands for Free Agent Acquisition Budget. So it's a separate fund that you have from if you're in an auction draft. It's a separate fund from that, and you have a set amount of money for transactions in that year. That's what you should be doing because it's like adding players, signing them to contracts in the NFL. It's just so much better. Now, I will also say you have to set your league up so there can be $0 transactions because if there's not $0 transactions, then you're limiting what that team can do because if they have to spend at least $1 and they don't have $1, you've locked that team in as it is. So you should never do that. But having that set amount of money to bid on players, that is essential. That's awesome. That's way more strategy, and it's a lot more fun. It's really intense. You're just waiting to see waivers clear and see who bid the most. Jason, your thoughts?
Absolutely agree. I mean, the fab is bring again a whole new level of strategy and something you should be thinking about, especially if you have an auction league. And something that we did in our league of record was you have your budget for drafting, and then when you're done, if you have any money left over from your budget from drafting, it goes into your fab. So that again, another level of strategy, and that's a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful thing. It really is. And as far as pushing it to your league, basically this is the bottom line. You let them know that, hey, you know what? Fab is for advanced players. This is for the best of the best. These are the guys that can actually assign that value. And anybody can assign value before the season begins when you're drafting. The hard part is assigning value during the season. So when he comes up and you're like, you know what, I need this running back. I want this running back. I have an injured running back. I need to get this guy.
Exactly.
What am I willing to spend? What's the value?
Because the need and the value and the perceived value is different team to team, need for need. Exactly why it's awesome.
Exactly right. And I'll tell you, this is something that I'll come out and say it right now. Griffin is a better fantasy player than I am. That is just the bottom line. He's doing it longer.
Well, thank you.
Hey, you can't argue with success. How many championships have you gotten in our league of record?
I've
like 8?
Only lost one time in our league of record, and that was to you. To
and
be fair,
you lost to me.
No, I didn't lose to you.
And
I lost the round beforehand, but you won it that year.
Well, yeah.
I didn't make the playoffs
won that
year.
But the bottom line here is
Super
this:
Bowl.
as good as Griffin is at certain things, I consistently whip his butt at Fab because I always am able to add value.
I'm too conservative.
And figure out who he's too conservative, and that's the thing. He knows that, and going into next year, he's going to try to adjust, and I'm going to adjust. So, and we're doing this thinking right now, and guys, it's in May. We're May, and we're talking about it. Okay, so that's what I'm talking about, guys. You want to push this to your league. Like, look, are we advanced players? Are we good? Are we good at this? And if we are, then we should have absolutely no problem pushing for a fab and assigning value during the season, not just during the draft.
I could not agree more. I also love the and people might be asking, why do the again, if you understand auction, you'll understand this better. Why transfer the auction budget into fab budget? Because it's another layer of strategy, and I think by far and away the most essential thing of all, it keeps players from overspending and just blowing things up, because you want to end the auction draft with money left over, because then that money transfers into your season-long free agent budget, and that is essential for making moves during the season. And this is why auction and fab together is phenomenal. That's what we do. That's what we stressly. I cannot recommend it enough to players that you have to try it, because you will love it. And there's a lot more wrinkles to it that we can even talk about, so that's huge. I kind of want to backtrack really fast, because I was just thinking with the IR question. Sorry to sidetrack here. I do support 2 IR in a dynasty league, so. I want to take back what I said. But in redraft leagues, 1 IR. So, yeah, hopefully that's helpful. I forget who was asking about IR spots. I think that was Sam from Houston. And hopefully this is helpful. Talene from Twitter. I'm so bad with names.
I'm going to say Talene.
Talene from Twitter. There you go. TT. All right, so let's go on to Jason from Arizona. Jason, why are you writing into the show, buddy?
I'm just that good.
Yeah, that good or that desperate, or I don't know how to look at
Either
it.
one.
Yeah,
either one.
I'm assuming there's more than one Jason in the grand state of Arizona, and he
asked.
It's
a very large state.
Also because this is a pretty easy question, I think, to answer for either one of us. Jason from Arizona, hello, other Jason, asks, what is the best scoring system, and how do I get my league to change after we've been doing the same thing for 10+ years? Well, the change, I think, is easy. We talked about that earlier on. Democracy, but really, and this goes back to even the recommended fab system and how you get your league to do it. You can play back this episode of the show, and we will talk them into it, because we're making, I think, compelling arguments. If not, the democratic approach is what you have to do. Approach each member of your league individually, talk it up, tell them why it's awesome, and then get the league together and vote on it. That's the easiest way to do it. And, as long as people understand why you're making these changes, how it is for the better, how it's going to help advance your league, generally they should be behind it. A lot of people don't like change, but if you explain to them how basic and stupid they're being and how much better it could be if we'd made this small change, it makes a big difference. Now, for me, the number one must-have thing, regardless of your preference of league format, draft format, scheduling, playing style, whatever your league's build is, you have to have fractional scoring, decimal scoring, whatever you look at it, because I can't tell you how often in our league of record, which starts 22 players, we start 11 defense, 11, it's 10 offense and a special teams unit. I can't tell you how many times I see those games, which normally get over 200 points each because of how big they are, how often those games end with less than 1 point breaking up the difference. So you need to have decimal scoring, because if you get a tie, there's nothing worse in fantasy football than a tie. I would rather lose a game than tie, because nothing comes from that. It hurts both teams. It's dumb. And then a lot of leagues will have their own tie-breaking format, but it's so rarely invoked, most people don't even know what it is. A lot of times leagues don't have a tie-breaking format because they don't think, oh, it's never going to happen, but then it does. So it's less likely to happen if you have decimal scoring, and so I'm a huge believer in that. Beyond that, I'm a big believer in half point per reception. Full point, I think, is way too rewarding for little slot guys, PPR guys that just, well, obviously it's PPR, but little guys who go out there, they catch a little dump-off pass for less than a yard, or sometimes they catch the ball for negative yardage, which is a handoff, and well, obviously that will automatically be a handoff, but depending on how you look at it, they'll catch the ball for like 0.1 yard. Or maybe just 1 yard in general, which gets you 0.1 points. But because it's a PPR, they get a full point on top of that. So why is that worth the same as a guy who went out there in a standard league and caught the ball 10 yards down the field moving the change? It just doesn't make sense to me. So half point, I think, is a good way to reward the catch and making a play as good or bad as it may have been, and helping bump the receivers, that the bump that they generally need to be competitive or closer to what the running backs get with their heavy volume. So, Jason, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I like PPR, and the reason for that is because, look, this is a passing league. It's a passing league, guys. It's become a passing league. It's a passing league. Look at the running backs. Look at the best running backs in the league. Who do you got? You got David Johnson. You got Le'Veon Bell, Todd Gurley. These guys catch the ball in the backfield. That's one of the reasons that we've had a resurgence in the importance of the running back. So, to me, PPR is very, very important. I do like half-point PPR because it's a nice compromise if you don't want to get crazy.
I just
and then let me finish,
I know.
man.
I'll wait. I'm sorry.
But the same exact thing that we've been saying this whole time about how you make changes in your league applies. Okay, you make changes in your league by saying, "Hey guys, this is the change I want to make. This is why I want to make this change. Let's vote."
Yep, I agree. So what I was going to say is the reason I don't like full point per reception as well is because it devalues the running back position, which is already a volatile position as it is.
I think it does.
It does, though, because unless you get a pass-catching running back, they finish so far behind wide receivers in PPR league that most of them they just plummet in drafts for obvious reasons. I think it moves the needle too far the other direction, which is why I think half point is that great compromise. But to each their own. A lot of people play PPR. A lot of people play half point per reception. Most people play standard. So it's case by case. And as you can see, even amongst the show, as per usual, we are not in unison on everything. Let's move on to Rob in Vancouver. Hello, Rob. Asks, when starting a keeper league, what is the ideal amount of keepers, and how do you decide keeper costs? So for me, 3 keepers is kind of that sweet spot, because anything beyond that, you're pushing closer into Dynasty League territories. Anything less than that, it feels like a just kind of added function of the league and not the format of the league as a whole. I think 3 is that sweet spot, and then you can maybe make an adjustment one way or another depending on how it works out. But I think I play in a lot of startup keeper leagues. That's where it always is. It always feels right to me. I've played in ones that weren't, and it just didn't work out. And as far as deciding the cost, a lot of teams will do the same round that they were drafted in. I think that it should usually be the same round they were drafted in, plus moving them up a round. So if it was a second rounder that you drafted, you have to keep them in the first, that kind of thing. It keeps people from holding on to the same players for too long, because it's not a dynasty league, it's a keeper league. And then you can also limit the number of years. It's all case by case. Again, take it to your league, vote on it, see what they want to do. But there's a lot of ways to add these little wrinkles to it that makes it interesting. But I'm a firm believer in that keeping it the same value you drafted them at, plus a round. If that doesn't work, another option is based on ADP. So, maybe you drafted, I don't know, Alvin Kamara last year in the middle rounds, and now he's obviously a first-round guy. Well, you wouldn't be able to keep him for a 9th, 8th round pick this year. You'd have to keep him for a first, and that's a way to keep things even as well and keep things, fair. What are your thoughts, Jason?
Yeah, pretty much the same. I mean, the idea is that you don't want them. I mean, we had a keeper league where we were able to keep a lot of players, and unfortunately that league blew up. But it was a dynasty league, but yeah, you get the idea. I think 3 keepers is fine, and I definitely think that you should keep them at the round that you drafted them at. So if you drafted Todd Gurley in the second round, even though he's a first-round talent, then good on you. You only have to spend a second-round pick to keep Todd Gurley on your team. I like that.
Do you like to keep a limitation on how many years? A lot of times I see like 2-3 years.
No.
No, you want
I don't.
I keep him forever?
No. Yeah, if I drafted the dude, I just let me keep him. I drafted the guy who's on my team.
I guess it's the difference of wanting to add more wrinkles or not. Simplifying it. Every league's different. So, yeah. All right. So, yeah, hopefully that's helpful, Rob. Let's go to Al in Kansas City. Ask, what should the trade veto period be? We just talked about this. I'm a believer that there should not be a trade veto period. So, I just think it makes it a lot more interesting. You agree? All right. There you go. We already talked about it. So, yeah, let's just move on. Hopefully that's helpful, Al. And again, everyone else who asked all these questions, I hope this is helping all of you. Let's go to Russ in Jacksonville, Florida. He asks, what is your ideal roster composition? Now, if you're in a beginner league, a casual league, a work league, something like that, keep it simple. Standard is fine, which generally is 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, a flex, which is a running back, wide receiver, usually tight end, kicker, defense, 5-6 bench spots, depending on your league. Maybe more, maybe less. For us, our big league of record, which to me is phenomenal. I love our league of record. We go all out. So we do a quarterback, 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, 2 tight ends. We do a flex position, which can be running back, wide receiver, or tight end, kicker, defense, but we take away the defensive scoring. It's only special team scoring. And then, so you're drafting a special teams unit. And then we draft an 11-man IDP defense. So we have, 3 linemen, 3 linebackers, 4 defensive backs, and then 1 flex position, so you can go 3-4-4-3 or a nickel defense. And then that's our team, and I love it. And so much strategy goes into it, so much knowledge that you have to have. That's next level. I don't expect you to do that, but if you asked me the question and I answered it. That's truly how I feel. Otherwise, keep it simple. Maybe add. Actually, no, I would just say keep it simple. If you want to get more serious, add as you want to go, what you like. Because there are a lot of people like 2 quarterback leagues. There's teams, there's leagues out there that I have. We talked about this last year on, I think it was our Contrarian league format show we did. Talking about how some wanted to do only a 1 running back league because a lot of people were scared off by the running backs over the last couple of years and how volatile the position's been. There's only so many workhorse backs in the league, but that takes away from the strategy. You see all these wrinkles. So I would say simple or add as you see fit, but I love our league of record. It to me, nothing touches that. I love it so much. What are your thoughts, Jason?
I completely agree with you. I love our league of record. One of the reasons I love our league of record is because defense, man, defense. It's not just about going, I like the Arizona Cardinal defense and picking them and you're done. You got to go and you got to do the homework. You got to pick individual players. And that is awesome because you get to look and see, just because, let's say, I was just talking about Arizona. Let's say you really like Arizona like I do. And you go, you know what, I really enjoy watching Patrick Peterson play. He's great. I want him on my team. Well, there's a problem with that because Patrick Peterson's a corner. And he's not just a corner, he's a shutdown corner. And what does that mean? That means quarterbacks don't throw at it. That means he's not getting his hands on the ball. That means he's not scoring any points. So, yeah, that's something you have to think about when you get in here. You got to get in there and you got to really, really think about it. And also, same thing goes into when you're drafting a flex position. I love the fact we have a defensive flex position player. That gives me so much more flexibility. And 9 times out of 10, I'm throwing a linebacker in there because those guys score tons and tons of points. So for me, there's nothing better than a full-on 22-man league.
Yeah, and it's also knowing the offensive line because you have to know, this team is really bad at pass protection. Maybe you get a new lineman in there who's going to really get in there. Maybe they're really bad at run blocking. You get those linebackers that are really good sideline to sideline. You get those tackles. Maybe it's a team that really likes to throw the ball a lot in the intermediate to long. So you get an extra corner out there, or safety preferably, that can also run up and stop the run more often than not. Yeah, like you said, Patrick Peterson, for instance, big name. You don't necessarily want the big name because if he's not batting the ball, intercepting it, tackling, he's not getting you points. So it's a whole new level of strategy. Again, we talk about this a lot on Patreon, patreon.com/thefantasyfootballfanatics. Head over there, subscribe, and get yourself a lot of this. We're going to be ramping up all this conversation very soon and new shows over there, and we'll be talking about all this. But yeah, it's amazing. It's a lot of fun. But for your standard leagues, probably way more intense because IDP is such a minute just thing in fantasy. Most people aren't doing it, and it's because it's really hard. It's really complicated. You have to completely change your thought process, and it's much, much harder to find information on it. So a lot of people shy away from it, and it's understandable. It's intimidating. But if you want to really take your league to the next level, holy hell, it's fun. So keep it simple or go crazy like we do or anything in between. But I would recommend to start, keep it simple, especially if you're new or it's a casual league. So yeah, but yeah, our ideal roster consumption, that's what it would be, because that's what it is. All right, let's go to Josh in Arkansas. He asks, thoughts on fantasy playoffs. We play to week 17 to get the most out of the season, but I hear a lot of negative things about it. Yeah, for good reason, Josh in Arkansas. Sorry, don't mean to bash you, but yeah, there's a reason that everyone says don't play to week 17. Do we all wish that the league year went longer? Absolutely. Do we wish, therefore, that fantasy went longer? Yeah, we spent all year waiting for it, and it's over in a flash. But that's because in week 17, it is just a dumpster fire of who's going to start, who's going to sit, who's going to start for how many snaps. I mean, last year, for instance, a lot of teams in the NFL sat their starters. You were not able to start the players that got you to the dance in the dance itself, in your championship. Todd Gurley, a prime example. This guy was a monster in what would have been your typical fantasy playoffs. Obviously not the same in a Week 17 game. Same with a lot of starters out there. They sit. You have to drop superstar players for third-string bench guys in hopes that they go out there and they get you 2.5 points as opposed to your superstar that was averaging you 20+. It's dumb. It doesn't work. And it's just a really, really bad idea. And even teams that aren't making the playoffs, you see a lot of teams that are so far removed and they've got all these question marks, and they go out there and they sit their starters to start bench players to see what they have in the wings for future years. It's just a really bad idea. It ruins the integrity of your league. You're not going to get the result that you should have gotten for your league champion, most likely, because everyone's ad dropping as they're getting news, even leading up to kickoff. So it's dumb. I understand, like, oh, well, that's strategy too. You got to know. But no, because that ruins the integrity of the game. So just don't do it.
Don't do
play.
It.
Standard is 2 weeks, week 15, 16, or if you want to be really cool with it, and I actually really kind of like this, but it's hard to justify with how short the season is. I like a double elimination playoffs. So you start playoffs in week 13. So 13-14 against the same opponent. If you tie, it becomes who scored the most points, and then you go to your championship game weeks 15-16. That's a lot of fun too, but then you sacrifice 2 more weeks of your season. So that's why I'm not necessarily a big backer of it with how short the NFL league year is as it is now. But it's a fun wrinkle. It keeps that 1 week fluke from happening. But hey, that happens any given Sunday in the NFL. Same thing happens for fantasy football. Todd Gurley won a lot of people leagues last year because he had monster performances. Like I said, those 2 weeks. I had him on my team in my league of record. I didn't think I was going to make it to the playoffs until he went off and had a unbelievable performance and made the game completely out of reach for my opponent. So, yeah, a lot of information there. Jason, your thoughts?
No, I completely agree. If you're playing, we've said it a million times if you've listened to the show for any amount of time. If you're playing in Week 17, I'm sorry, but you're wrong. Week 17 is a trash week. It's when all the players that, like you said, all the superstars sit down, all the guys that are fragile and they want to save them for the playoffs sit down. It's when they throw in all the backup quarterbacks because, they want to sit Tom Brady down and let him just rest. It's just not a good idea. It's not a good time to play fantasy football. So I completely agree with Griffin on this one. Do not play in Week 17.
Yeah, and we're almost out of time, so let's do this last one. We've basically already answered it. So Jose, they didn't have the little symbol, but I'm assuming it's Jose from Oregon. asked, how do I keep the league interesting all year round? And I think we kind of already answered this. Obviously, if you have a keeper or dynasty league, it makes the league be active year round because you have to be interacting. Trading rookie draft picks. Have the ability to trade draft picks keeps the league very active. Off-season gatherings and meetings and just events in general. Like there's a lot of things you can do to spice it up. And another thing which I highly recommend, which ours has been kind of dead, and for our league it's for obvious reasons, but we're gonna spice it up as well. We have a private group a secret group on Facebook, for instance, where we post just some very demoralizing things to our opponents and trash talk, and we put league announcements out there and news, and it's just a place where the league can gather and you just interact and have fun from your cell phone, comfort of your own home. Even just keep the league active. That's how you keep it fun and entertaining, and how you keep it interesting all year round, as the question asks. Jason, your thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, like we said, scheduling some kind of league meeting right after the draft is a good thing to do. So you can start talking about new rules and how we're going to move forward and things of that nature. So yeah, I completely agree. I think you just schedule stuff, get together on social media, do that kind of thing. The ceremonial handing off of the trophy is important, and same thing for the bottom guy in the league and things of that nature. So I mean, you just got to get creative. And you got to keep everybody engaged.
I agree. It's what you got to do. So yeah, wow. All right, yeah, we got to get out of here. So yeah, that's going to do it for us today. Please make sure you guys tune in on Friday when we will be talking about alternative league formats. So talking about all those different ways that you see drafts happen, how you see rosters formed, a lot of those little interesting wrinkles. We're going to be talking all about all those things, and it should be a lot of fun. And of course, we'll do a lot of mock drafts throughout the offseason in a lot of those alternate formats. You can kind of see what you should be doing, how you should be prioritizing players, what your strategy should be. It's stuff you need to know, because not all of us play in your standard redraft league, and some of us are maybe thinking about trying other things like auction. Everybody do auction. So yeah, with that, we are out of here. Do you have any parting thoughts, Jason?
CJ, get your butt back on this show.
I know, CJ. Come on, you flaky.
Come on, man. Quit
guy. You doing stuff that we don't even know.
Whatever you're doing.
Yeah.
Quit going into the Alps, man. We need you here.
I know, right? Let's see what activity he's doing on Friday if he's not back. So, yeah, if you want to follow, again, if you want a lot of more conversation on, wow, that was a terrible sentence. If you want a lot more information on a lot of these things we've been talking about, patreon.com/thefantasyfootballfanatics. We'll be covering a lot of that in upcoming episodes there. Follow the show on Twitter at the FF Fanatics. You can interact with us very easily there, or individually. I'm at GPalmerFFF, and Jason is at Jason Cabrera 13. So with that, we're out of here, everyone. Take care. We'll see you on Friday. Bye. Oh, and I want to also say congratulations to my buddy Josh, who's getting married. So, yay. Shout outs to friends and family. All right,
it's all down here from here, Josh.
Wow. Bye, guys.